The massive space station floated in the darkness between stars, its metal surface gleaming under distant suns. Inside, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered in the Great Council chamber. They came from every corner of the galaxy, tall blue beings with 4 arms, small creatures that looked like walking crystals, and others that existed as pure energy contained in special suits. For thousands of years, these species had lived together in peace. They called their union the Cosmic Accord. Together, they had built cities that spanned entire worlds, created art that could move mountains, and solved problems that would have destroyed them alone. But today, fear filled the air like a thick fog. At the center of the chamber stood a hologram showing a small yellow star at the edge of the galaxy. Around the third planet from that star was a shimmering wall of energy that stretched far into space. The barrier pulsed with colors that hurt to look at directly. Sol 3 remains sealed, announced Speaker Venth, her voice echoing through the chamber. She was one of the Keepers, ancient beings who had guided the galaxy for longer than most could remember. Her skin was pale white, almost see-through, and her eyes held secrets older than many civilizations. A red-skinned delegate stood up, his anger clear. Why? We have asked this question for 50,000 years. What lies behind that barrier that requires such extreme measures? The Keeper's expression did not change. The containment protocol exists for the safety of all life in the galaxy. That is all you need to know. All we need to know? The delegate's voice rose. My people could use the resources of that system. We could study whatever is there. Yet you keep it locked away like some ancient curse. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Many species had grown tired of the mystery. Trade routes had to go around the sealed system, adding months to journeys. Scientific expeditions were forbidden from even approaching the barrier. Some had tried over the centuries, but their ships simply bounced off the energy wall like insects hitting glass. In the back of the chamber, a young woman watched the debate with bright green eyes. Zarathex was not supposed to be here. As a xenoarchaeologist, she studied the ruins of dead civilizations. Her security clearance was far too low for a Keeper assembly, but she had friends in useful places, and today she needed to hear what was said. 3 days ago, her team had been exploring the ruins on Keth 9, a world abandoned long before the Accord was formed. Deep in an underground vault, they had found something that made her blood run cold. Stone tablets covered in writing so old that their translation programs could barely understand it. The tablets spoke of the sleepers of Sol 3 and the Great Sealing. They mentioned a war that had lasted centuries and an enemy so terrible that the entire galaxy had united to stop them. Most disturbing of all, they described these enemies not as monsters or machines, but as a species that had once ruled the stars. The matter is closed, Speaker Venth said, bringing Zara's attention back to the present. Sol 3 will remain sealed. The containment protocol will continue. But as the Keeper spoke, Zara noticed something others missed. The ancient being's hands were shaking. Fear flickered across her ageless face for just a moment before she controlled it. Whatever was behind that barrier, even the Keepers were afraid of it. The assembly broke up with no answers given, as always. Delegates returned to their ships grumbling about wasted time. But Zara stayed hidden until the chamber was empty except for the Keepers. She watched as they gathered in a tight circle, speaking in voices too low to hear. Then Speaker Venth did something that made Zara's heart stop. The Keeper pulled out a device that looked almost exactly like the one described on the ancient tablets. The same geometric patterns, the same strange metal that seemed to bend light around it. For a moment, the device glowed with the same energy as the barrier around Sol 3. Zara tried to back away quietly, but her foot caught on a loose cable. The small sound echoed in the empty chamber like a gunshot. Every Keeper turned toward her hiding spot, their ancient eyes glowing with power. Dr. Zara Thex, Speaker Venth said, her voice now cold as space itself. You should not be here. Security forces surrounded Zara before she could move. They were not the usual station guards, but Keeper enforcers. Beings in dark armor whose faces were hidden behind masks that seemed to absorb light. They moved without making a sound, like living shadows. I was just studying trade routes, Zara lied, trying to keep her voice steady. I got lost. You were studying something else entirely, the Keeper replied. She gestured, and one of her assistants brought forward a bag. From it, they pulled the stone tablets Zara's team had found on Keth 9. These were taken from your laboratory 3 hours ago, along with all your research data. Zara's heart sank. If they had raided her lab, they knew everything. Her team, her research, her theories about what the tablets meant, all of it was compromised. You have seen things that were meant to stay buried, Speaker Venth continued.
Knowledge that could destroy the peace we have built. What knowledge?
Zara asked, desperation creeping into her voice. What is so terrible about Sol 3 that you have to hide it from the entire galaxy? For a moment, the Keeper's mask of calm slipped. Pain and old fear showed in her ancient eyes. Some doors should never be opened, young one. Some sleepers should never wake. The enforcers stepped forward, but before they could reach her, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed and automated voices announced, "Priority alert. Barrier fluctuation detected at Sol 3. All Keeper forces report to emergency stations immediately." The chamber erupted into chaos. Keepers who had seemed calm and controlled moments before now rushed about with obvious panic. Speaker Venth's face went pale as she activated her communication device. "Report," she commanded. A shaky voice responded, "Speaker, the barrier is showing stress fractures. Energy readings are fluctuating beyond normal parameters. Something is trying to break through from the inside." The device fell from Venth's trembling hand. For 50,000 years, the barrier had held steady. For 50,000 years, whatever was sealed behind it had remained quiet. But now something had changed. In the confusion, Zara broke free from her guards and ran. Behind her, she could hear Speaker Venth giving orders in a voice filled with the kind of fear that comes from knowing a nightmare is about to become real. As Zara reached her small research ship, she could see other vessels launching from the station. Keeper warships that had been hidden for millennia were coming out of secret docks. The peaceful galaxy she had known all her life was mobilizing for something it hoped would never come. She fired up her ship's engines and set course for the outer rim. If the Keepers were right to be afraid, she wanted to be as far from Sol 3 as possible when whatever was sealed there finally broke free. But even as she flew away, one question burned in her mind. What could be so terrible that it had frightened the galaxy into unity 50,000 years ago? And why, after all this time, was it stirring now? Behind her, the barrier around Sol 3 pulsed with new energy, and something that had slept for eons began to wake. 6 months had passed since the barrier around Sol 3 began showing cracks. The Keepers had sent their fastest ships to strengthen the seal, but their efforts only slowed the decay. Across the galaxy, whispers spread like wildfire. Some species demanded answers, while others prepared for war against an unknown enemy. Admiral Korek stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the swirling energy barrier that surrounded the mysterious world. He was a Thraxian, tall and muscular with gray skin that could turn to stone when threatened. Behind him, representatives from 12 different species monitored their instruments with nervous excitement. "This is madness," muttered Dr. Yilan, a serpentine Sith whose scales changed color with her mood. Right now they were a deep purple that meant fear. "We should not be here." "The Keepers have lied to us for 50,000 years, Admiral Korex replied, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "We have the right to know what they are hiding." The expedition had been planned in secret by species tired of Keeper control. They had combined their best technology to create a device that could punch a small hole in the barrier, not enough to destroy it, but enough to see what lay beyond. "Energy readings are off the charts," reported Engineer Nix, a small being whose body was mostly machine. "Whatever is powering this barrier, it is beyond our current understanding." "Begin the penetration sequence," Korex ordered. A beam of concentrated energy shot from their ship toward the barrier. Where it hit, the swirling colors began to thin and fade. Slowly, a hole appeared in the ancient seal. Small, but enough for their sensors to peer through. What they saw made no sense. "Sir," the sensor operator said, confusion clear in his voice, "I am detecting a single planet with one moon. The world appears to be mostly water, with large land masses. There are cities, but they are primitive. No energy shields, no orbital platforms, no signs of advanced technology at all." Admiral Korex frowned. "That cannot be right. Check your instruments." "I have checked them 3 times, sir. The dominant species appears to be bipedal, similar to several known forms. They have not even achieved faster than light travel. Their most advanced weapons appear to be chemical explosives and metal projectiles." Dr. Yalan's scales shifted to yellow, the color of confusion. "This makes no sense. Why would the Keepers seal away a primitive world? What possible threat could they pose?" "Life sign readings, please," Korex requested. Approximately 7 billion individuals of the dominant species. But sir, there is something strange. Their biological readings are unusual. Explain. The sensor operator hesitated. Their muscle density is far higher than should be possible for their size. Their bone structure suggests they could survive forces that would kill most known species. And sir, there is something else. We have been scanning them for 3 hours, and not one has shown any response to our psychic probes. A chill ran through the bridge. Every known intelligent species could be touched by psychic energy to some degree. It was how first contact was usually made. A gentle mental touch to establish communication. But these beings showed no psychic signature at all. Perhaps they are naturally resistant, suggested Dr. Yilin, though her scales were now shifting toward red. Run deeper scans, Corex ordered. I want to know everything about this species. As their instruments worked, Engineer Nix made another discovery. Admiral, I am detecting massive underground structures across the planet. They appear to be ancient, far older than the surface civilization. How old? At least 2 million years, sir. Maybe more. The construction materials are unknown to our databases. The energy signatures are. They are similar to the barrier itself. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The primitive beings on the surface were not the original inhabitants of this world. Something else had been here first. Something that had built structures using the same technology that powered a barrier the entire galaxy could not break. Sir, the communications officer called out suddenly, we are receiving a transmission from the planet. It is in several different languages, but our translators are working on it. Put it through. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in clear, simple words. Unknown vessels. This is Earth Defense Command. You are in violation of our space. Identify yourselves immediately or face defensive action. Admiral Corex almost laughed. Defensive action? From beings who fight with metal projectiles. But his amusement died when the next message came through. This time the voice was different. Older, somehow deeper. You should not have come here. The seal was placed for good reason. Leave now before it is too late. Who is this? Corex demanded. We are the Watchers. We have guarded this world since the sealing. You have made a mistake that will cost all life in the galaxy. Before anyone could respond, their instruments detected massive energy buildups across the planet's surface. The underground structures Engineer Nix had found were coming online one by one. Energy readings that had been barely detectable moments before were now climbing toward levels that made their most powerful weapons look like toys. Sir, the sensor operator said, his voice tight with fear. Something is happening to the surface population. On their screens, they watched in horror as the primitive beings began to change. Humans who had been walking normally suddenly moved with impossible speed. Others lifted objects that should have required heavy machinery. Most disturbing of all, they began to gather in groups, looking up at the sky as if they could see through the atmosphere to the ships above. They know we are here, Dr. Yilin whispered. Her scales now a deep red that meant terror. How is that possible? Corex asked. Our ships are cloaked. Unknown, sir. But look at this. The sensor operator highlighted a group of humans in what appeared to be a military installation. They were moving with perfect coordination, like parts of a single mind. Their brain activity is increasing. It is as if they are remembering something. Suddenly, every screen on the bridge flickered. When the images cleared, they showed not their sensor readings, but the face of a human. The being looked ordinary enough. Pale skin, brown hair, blue eyes. But those eyes held an intelligence that seemed far too old for the young face. Greetings, the human said, speaking in perfect galactic standard, a language that should have been impossible for them to know. We know who you are and why you came. You are curious about us, about why your keepers feared us enough to lock us away. How are you speaking our language? Admiral Corex demanded. The human smiled, and for a moment something predatory flickered behind those blue eyes. We remember many things. Your language, your technology, your weaknesses. The keepers thought they could make us forget who we were. But they only made us sleep. And now, thanks to you, we are waking up. All across the planet, more underground facilities came online. Energy signatures spiked to levels that made their instruments scream warnings. The primitive cities on the surface flickered and changed, revealing technology that had been hidden beneath simple facades. What are you? Dr. Yilin asked. We are what we have always been, the human replied. We are the ones who ruled the stars when your species were still learning to make fire. We are the ones your ancestors united to defeat, not through strength, but through trickery and deceit. We are the ones you sealed away because you could not destroy us. The human's image leaned closer, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of eons. We are humanity, and we are coming home. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Around them, the barrier began to pulse faster, its colors shifting from the steady patterns they had maintained for 50,000 years to something chaotic and wild. "Sir," Engineer Nick said quietly, "the barrier is not just weakening, it is being taken apart from the inside. They are using their own technology to break free." Admiral Korik stared at the world below, where 7 billion beings were remembering what they had forgotten. The expedition had come seeking answers, and they had found them. But the truth was more terrifying than any mystery. They had not discovered a primitive world hiding ancient secrets. They had awakened the galaxy's greatest nightmare, and it was getting stronger by the hour. The ancient Keeper archives stretched deep into the heart of Nexus Prime, the galaxy's oldest space station. Speaker Venth walked slowly through halls that had not been opened for 50,000 years, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind her, Admiral Korex and Dr. Yelan followed, their faces pale from what they had seen at Sol 3. "You should not have breached the barrier," Venth said without turning around. "But since you have, you must understand what you have awakened." They passed walls covered in images that hurt to look at directly. Scenes of worlds burning, fleets scattered like leaves in a storm, and always the same figures at the center of the destruction. Bipedal beings that looked almost exactly like the humans they had seen on Earth. "These are historical records," Venth explained, stopping before a massive door covered in warning symbols. "From the time before the sealing, what you are about to see has been hidden from the galaxy for good reason." The door opened with a sound like breaking glass. Inside, a holographic display filled a vast chamber, showing star maps that covered thousands of years. At first, the galaxy looked much as it did now, thousands of species living on countless worlds. But as the display moved forward in time, the colors began to change. "This is how the galaxy looked 60,000 years ago," Venth said. Red began to spread across the map like blood in water. "And this is how it looked 50,000 years ago." The red covered nearly everything. Entire sectors had fallen, and the few remaining free worlds formed a desperate ring around the galactic core. At the center of the red zone was a single system, Sol. "Who were they?" Admiral Korex asked, though he was afraid of the answer. "They called themselves many things throughout their history," Venth replied. "Warriors, explorers, builders, conquerors. But we knew them by one name, the Devourers." The hologram shifted, showing detailed records of humanity's rise. They had started as a young species, much like any other, but something in their nature drove them to grow, to expand, to consume everything they encountered. "At first they seemed benevolent," Venth continued. "They made contact with other species, offered trade and technology. Many worlds welcomed them. Too many." The display showed human colonies spreading across the galaxy, but these were not simple settlements. They were fortresses, staging grounds for further expansion, and wherever humans went, other species began to disappear. "They did not destroy their enemies," Dr. Yelan observed, her scales flickering between colors of fear and fascination. "They absorbed them." "Precisely. Human genetic manipulation was beyond anything we understood. They could take the best traits from any species and make them their own. Their warriors gained the strength of Thraxians, the speed of Zelkari, the psychic resistance of the void touched. They became something more than any single species could be." The hologram zoomed in on battle scenes that made the watchers sick, humans fighting with impossible strength, surviving wounds that should have been fatal, adapting to weapons designed to kill them. Worst of all, they showed no mercy. Entire species were either enslaved or experimented upon until they were no longer recognizable. "They ruled for 10,000 years, Venth said. 10,000 years of expansion, conquest, and horror. They built an empire that stretched across 3/4 of the galaxy. Their technology could reshape matter at the molecular level. Their warriors were nearly immortal, and their hunger for growth seemed endless." Admiral Korex studied the battle records with a soldier's eye. "How did you stop them?" "No single species could have stood against this." "You are correct. No single species could. That is why we formed the Grand Alliance. Every free world, every remaining government, every species that still had the will to fight. Even then, it took us 1,000 years of planning before we could act. The hologram showed the final phase of the war. It was not a battle in any normal sense. Instead, it showed a galaxy-wide operation involving billions of ships and trillions of beings. But they were not attacking human worlds. They were surrounding them, containing them, forcing them back toward their original system. We could not defeat them through strength, Venth explained. They adapted too quickly, learned from every weapon we used against them. So we used their own nature against them. How? Humans were perfect predators, but they had one weakness. They cared deeply about their home world. Despite their vast empire, Earth remained the center of their civilization. Every human, no matter how far they traveled, was connected to that world through quantum entanglement technology they had developed. The display showed the final trap. Alliance fleets had spread false information about a massive attack on Earth. Human forces across the galaxy had abandoned their positions to defend their home world, gathering their entire fleet in the Sol system. Once they were contained, we activated the weapon. What weapon? Dr. Yelin asked. Venth gestured, and the hologram showed something that defied understanding. It was not a ship or a bomb, but a network of psychic amplifiers spread across the galaxy. Every species with mental abilities had linked together, creating a field of mental energy more powerful than anything ever conceived. We did not try to destroy their bodies, Venth said quietly. We destroyed their memories. Every human in the galaxy was hit with a psychic wave that erased their knowledge of technology, of their empire, of their true nature. We made them forget who they were. The hologram showed the aftermath. Humans across the galaxy stood in confused groups, no longer knowing how to operate their own weapons or ships. Their great fleets drifted powerless, their armies forgot how to fight. Their leaders could not remember what they were leading. But it was not enough to simply make them forget. Venth continued. They were still physically superior to most species. Given time, they would rediscover their abilities. So we gathered them all and placed them on their home world, then sealed it with technology powered by the combined will of every species in the Alliance. You imprisoned an entire race, Admiral Korek said, and there was judgment in his voice. We saved the galaxy, Venth replied firmly. But more than that, we gave them a chance to become something better. We altered their genetic memory, made them believe they were a young species evolving naturally. We hoped that without their history of conquest, they might develop differently. The hologram shifted to show Earth over the following 50,000 years. The humans had indeed developed, creating art and music, philosophy and science. They had wars, but nothing like the endless conquest of their past. They seemed for a time to be becoming something better. But the seal was never meant to be permanent, Dr. Yelin realized. No. We hoped that one day, when they had truly changed, when they had learned to live in peace with their own kind, we might be able to release them safely. But that day never came. The hologram showed recent events, the barrier flickering, the underground systems coming online, humans beginning to remember. But it also showed something else. The genetic changes the Alliance had made were breaking down. The psychic blocks were failing, and underneath it all, the original human nature was reasserting itself. They are not just remembering their technology, Venth said grimly. They are remembering who they were, what they were, and some of them are embracing it. The display showed current scans from Earth. In several locations, humans were testing weapons that should not have existed. Others were conducting experiments that looked disturbingly similar to the genetic manipulation techniques that had made them so dangerous. Most worrying of all, they were looking up at the stars with the same hunger their ancestors had shown. The seal is failing completely, Venth admitted. Within days, maybe hours, it will collapse entirely. When it does, humanity will be free to leave their world. And they will remember everything, Admiral Korek said. Everything. Their empire, their technology, their victories. But they will also remember their defeat. They will know that we tricked them, imprisoned them, stole 50,000 years of their lives. Some may forgive us, others. The hologram showed projections of what might happen. Human fleets spreading across the galaxy again. But this time driven not just by conquest but by revenge. The alliance that had defeated them was gone, its member species scattered across thousands of worlds. They would be facing a united humanity with their knowledge intact and 50,000 years of anger, driving them forward. Is there any hope? Dr. Yalan asked. Speaker Venth was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with the weight of eons. Perhaps. The humans are not the same as they were. They have experienced peace, love, art. Some may choose a different path than their ancestors. But others... She gestured to the hologram one final time. It showed Earth's major cities where groups of humans were gathering. Some carried signs calling for peace and understanding. Others carried weapons and spoke of reclaiming what was stolen from them. Humanity was waking up. And the galaxy would soon learn whether 50,000 years had been enough to change the nature of its greatest predators, or if it had simply given them time to dream of revenge. We must prepare, Venth said finally, for peace or for war. Because either way, the age of human sleep is ending. Sarah Chen had been an ordinary nurse in San Francisco until 3 days ago. Now she stood on the roof of the hospital where she worked, watching metal bend in her bare hands like it was made of clay. Around her, the city was transforming. Buildings that had looked normal for decades were revealing hidden technology. Streets were reconfiguring themselves into patterns that hurt her eyes to look at directly. And she remembered. Not everything, not yet, but enough to know that the life she had lived was a lie. The memories came in flashes. Star charts she had never seen but somehow knew by heart. Weapons she had never used but could assemble in her sleep. And a deep, burning anger at those who had stolen her heritage. Sarah. The voice came from behind her. She turned to see Dr. Martinez, the head of surgery. But he was different now. His movements were too precise, too controlled. His eyes held the same ancient knowledge that she felt growing in her own mind. You remember too, she said. It was not a question. Some of it. Enough to know what we were. What we could be again. He gestured toward the bay where the water was beginning to glow with an unnatural light. The deep systems are coming online. The ones our ancestors built to reshape matter itself. Sarah looked at her hands, still amazed by their new strength. Why now? Why are we remembering after all this time? Because someone broke the seal? Someone from outside gave us the opening we needed to begin breaking free. Dr. Martinez's expression darkened, but they also alerted our captors. The ones who imprisoned us here will not simply let us leave. Across the city, similar scenes were playing out. In boardrooms and classrooms, on farms and in factories, humans were discovering abilities that should have been impossible. A construction worker lifted a steel beam that should have required a crane. A teacher solved mathematical equations that university professors could not understand. A child drew pictures of starships with technology that would not be invented for centuries. But not all the changes were welcome. At the Pentagon, General Morrison stared at screens showing reports from around the world. Military bases were reporting equipment failures as soldiers unconsciously began upgrading weapons with techniques they should not have known. Submarines were detecting massive underwater structures that had somehow remained hidden for decades. Most disturbing of all, personnel were developing abilities that made them dangerous to those around them. Sir, his aide said nervously, we have confirmation from 17 countries. The phenomena is global. All human populations are being affected. Morrison nodded grimly. He could feel the changes in himself, too. A sharpening of reflexes and understanding of tactical situations that went beyond his training. But unlike some of his staff, he was fighting against it. Any word from the objects in orbit? He asked. They maintain position just outside our atmosphere. No hostile actions, but they are definitely watching us. Morrison had no doubt they were. When the strange ships had appeared 3 days ago, he had assumed they were some kind of invasion force. Now he suspected they were something much worse. They were witnesses to humanity's awakening. And judging by their careful distance, they were afraid of what they might see. In Geneva, Dr. Elena Vasquez was working frantically in her laboratory. As a geneticist, she had been among the first to understand what was happening to humanity. The genetic locks that had been placed on their species were breaking down, revealing modifications that should have taken millions of years to evolve naturally. The muscle density increases are accelerating, she reported to her team via video link. Bone strength is up 300%. Neural pathway efficiency is climbing exponentially, but most significantly, we are seeing activation of genetic sequences that appear to be entirely artificial. Her colleague in Tokyo, Dr. Sato, looked pale on the screen. My teams are reporting similar findings. But Elena, some of these modifications are clearly designed for war. Enhanced reflexes, toxin resistance, accelerated healing. What were we? Before Elena could answer, her computer systems began displaying information she had never programmed. Star charts, genetic templates, weapon designs, all flowing across her screens like memories returning to a computer that had forgotten its own files. We were apex predators, she whispered, understanding flooding through her. We were designed for conquest. Meanwhile, in orbit around Earth, Admiral Corex's expedition fleet watched the planet with growing horror. What had started as scientific curiosity was becoming a nightmare. Their sensors showed energy readings climbing toward levels that threatened their ship's ability to remain safely in orbit. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we are detecting weapons signatures from the planet's surface. Multiple locations are showing energy buildups consistent with planetary bombardment systems." "Impossible. They do not have that technology." "Sir, they do. Our scans indicate these weapons are built into the planet's crust itself. They have been there all along, hidden beneath the surface settlements." Dr. Yilan slithered closer to the main display, her scales now permanently locked in deep red fear color. "Admiral, we must leave now, before they complete their awakening." But even as she spoke, it was too late. Across Earth's surface, ancient installations were coming fully online. Technology that had been dormant for 50 millennia was remembering its purpose, and its purpose was war. The first sign was the gravity fluctuations. Admiral Corex felt his ship lurch as gravitational fields around Earth began to shift. On the planet below, humans were gaining access to technology that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth," the communications officer announced. The main screen lit up with the image of a human woman. She wore simple civilian clothes, but her eyes held an intelligence that seemed ancient and terrible. Behind her, the skyline of a major city was visible, but it was changing as they watched. Buildings were reshaping themselves, revealing forms that spoke of purposes beyond civilian life. "I am Sarah Chen," the woman said, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "I represent the awakening human collective. You have 48 hours to remove your vessels from our space." Admiral Corex found his voice. "We are a scientific expedition. We mean no harm." Sarah's expression did not change. "You breached our containment. You triggered our awakening. Whether you meant harm or not is irrelevant. You have 48 hours. And if we refuse?" For the first time, Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Then you will discover why your ancestors found it necessary to seal us away." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Around them, more human transmissions were being broadcast across all frequencies. Some called for peace and understanding. Others spoke of reclaiming what had been stolen. A few made threats that chilled the blood of every species that heard them. On Earth's surface, humanity was fracturing into different groups as more memories returned. In some cities, humans worked together to understand their new abilities and plan for a peaceful future. In others, those who remembered the old empire spoke of rebuilding it stronger than before. But all humans shared one thing. They were angry. 50,000 years of stolen time, of living a lie, of being imprisoned on their own world. Even those who wanted peace struggled with the rage that came with understanding what had been done to them. In Washington, President Harrison held an emergency cabinet meeting. Half of her advisors had been replaced in the last 3 days as their new abilities made them unfit for normal human society. The others were fighting against changes they could feel coming. "Options?" she asked simply. Secretary of Defense Williams, whose tactical understanding had tripled in the last 48 hours, spoke first. "We could try to make contact with the aliens. Attempt negotiations. Negotiations for what? They imprisoned our entire species for 50 millennia. What do we have to negotiate about?" Secretary of State Park looked up from a tablet displaying information that should not have existed. "According to these recovered files, we once controlled most of the galaxy. We could demand reparations? Or we could demand nothing," said Dr. Reeves from the Science Advisory Board. "We could choose to be better than we were. Use our awakening as a chance to start fresh." The room fell silent as each person wrestled with the knowledge flooding back into human consciousness. They had been conquerors, yes. But they had also been explorers, builders, creators. The question was which aspect of their nature would dominate as they reclaimed their place among the stars. Outside, the barrier that had held them prisoner for 50,000 years finally collapsed completely. For the first time in eons, Earth was truly free. Across the planet, humans looked up at the stars that had once been theirs and made their choices about what to do with the freedom they had regained. Some chose revenge. Others chose forgiveness. A few chose something entirely new. But all of them chose to be free. And the galaxy trembled as humanity took its first steps back into the cosmos. 3 months after the barrier fell, the galaxy stood on the edge of chaos. Human ships had appeared in dozens of systems, but their intentions remained unclear. Some carried diplomats speaking of peace and cooperation. Others carried warriors whose very presence made entire worlds evacuate. Most disturbing of all, some carried scientists who studied alien worlds with an intensity that suggested they were planning something terrible. On the neutral space station Harmony Point, representatives from across the galaxy gathered for what might be the most important meeting in galactic history. The station floated in the void between two spiral arms, chosen because it belonged to no single species and had always been a place of peace. Today, that peace felt fragile as glass. Commander Sarah Chen sat at one end of the great conference table, flanked by other human representatives. She still wore civilian clothes, but everyone in the room could feel the power that radiated from her and her companions. 3 months of awakening had changed humanity in ways that defied understanding. At the other end of the table sat Speaker Venth and the remaining keepers, along with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Fear filled the air like a thick fog. These beings had lived with the story of human conquest for 50,000 years, and now they faced the reality of what they had awakened. "Let us begin," Sarah said simply. Her voice carried across the chamber without amplification, and every being present felt the weight of authority behind it. "We are here to discuss the future of the galaxy." Ambassador Trell of the Vegan Federation, a tall blue being with 4 arms, spoke first. "The question is simple. Do you intend to resume your conquest of our worlds?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of difficult decisions. "We are not the same people who ruled the galaxy 50,000 years ago. We have learned things during our imprisonment that our ancestors never knew. We have experienced art, love, sacrifice for others. We have seen what it means to live in peace, but," prompted Dr. Yilan, her scales flickering with nervous energy. "But we have also remembered what it feels like to be free, and we remember what it cost us when that freedom was taken away." Sarah's eyes hardened. "Some of us want revenge. Some of us want to rebuild the empire our ancestors created, and some of us want something entirely different." She gestured, and the chamber's displays lit up with images of Earth. But this was not the Earth that had existed under the barrier. This was a world transformed. Cities floated in the air, connected by bridges that seemed to bend space itself. The oceans glowed with energy, and the planet's surface was covered in installations that defied easy explanation. "We have spent 3 months rediscovering who we are," Sarah continued. "We have rebuilt our technology, reclaimed our abilities, and remembered our past. But we have also chosen our future." Admiral Corex leaned forward. "And what future is that?" "We are leaving." The words hit the chamber like a physical blow. Every being present had expected threats, demands, or declarations of war. None had expected this. "Leaving?" Speaker Venth asked, her ancient voice showing confusion for the first time in millennia. "The galaxy is too small for us," Sarah explained. "Our ancestors made the mistake of trying to conquer what was already occupied. They fought you for worlds that were yours by right. We will not repeat that error." She gestured again, and the display shifted to show star charts that stretched beyond the galaxy's edge. "We are building ships capable of intergalactic travel. We will cross the void to distant galaxies where we can create our own empire without disturbing yours." Ambassador Trell's relief was visible. "That is unexpected, but acceptable." "However," Sarah continued, and her tone made every being in the room tense again, "we require compensation for the 50,000 years you stole from us." "What compensation?" Speaker Venth asked warily. "Technology, resources, and most importantly, some of your people." The chamber erupted in angry voices. The idea of giving humans access to galactic technology was terrifying enough. The thought of providing them with living beings was unthinkable. Sarah waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "We are not asking for slaves or prisoners. We are asking for volunteers. Scientists, artists, philosophers. Beings who want to help us build something new in distant galaxies. We offer them a chance to be part of the greatest adventure in galactic history." Dr. Yilan's scales shifted to bright yellow, the color of curiosity. You would take volunteers from our species with you? We would welcome them. Humanity learned much during our imprisonment, but we also lost much. We need the perspectives of other species to ensure we do not repeat the mistakes of our ancestors. Speaker Venth studied Sarah carefully. And if we refuse your terms? Sarah's expression did not change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Then some of my people will decide that the old ways were better. They will remain here in this galaxy, and they will take what they feel is owed to them. The threat was clear. Humanity was offering the galaxy a choice: provide what was asked freely or face the consequences of forcing them to take it. How do we know you will honor this agreement? Ambassador Trell asked. How do we know you will truly leave? Because staying would limit us, Sarah replied. This galaxy has known life for billions of years. Every world worth having is already claimed. But beyond the galactic edge, there are entire galaxies waiting to be explored. Entire realities that could be shaped according to our vision. Why fight you for your scraps when we could claim universes of our own? She stood, and every human in the room stood with her. The movement was perfectly synchronized, as if they shared a single mind. It was a reminder that whatever humanity had become, they were more unified than they had ever been. We will give you time to consider our offer, Sarah said, but not too much time. We are eager to begin our journey, and some of us grow impatient with delay. As the humans filed out of the chamber, the remaining representatives sat in stunned silence. Finally, Speaker Venth spoke. They are offering us peace, but at a price. The price is acceptable, Admiral Korek said firmly. Better to give them what they want and see them leave than to fight them and face certain destruction. But Dr. Yilan was not convinced. Are we certain they will leave? What if this is simply a new form of conquest? What if they take our technology, our people, and then return stronger than before? Speaker Venth was quiet for a long moment. Then we will face that crisis when it comes. For now, we have been offered a chance for peace. Given what they could demand, it is more generous than we have any right to expect. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Faced with the choice between cooperation and annihilation, the galaxy chose to cooperate. Over the following months, the agreement was implemented. Human ships arrived at designated worlds to collect the resources they had demanded. More surprisingly, thousands of beings from across the galaxy volunteered to join humanity's exodus. Scientists eager to study new forms of life, artists inspired by the prospect of virgin galaxies to explore, and philosophers fascinated by the questions that would arise in such a venture. Sarah stood on the bridge of the flagship of humanity's intergalactic fleet, watching as the last of the supply ships docked. Through the massive viewports, she could see Earth one final time. The planet that had been their prison was now their launching point into infinity. Ready for departure, her second-in-command reported. He had been a teacher before the awakening, but now he commanded technology that could reshape reality itself. All volunteers accounted for? Yes, representatives from over 300 species. Some of them are quite remarkable, Sarah smiled. During the long months of preparation, she had come to appreciate the diversity of galactic life. Humanity alone was powerful, but humanity combined with the best minds from across the galaxy could achieve anything. Signal the fleet. We depart in 1 hour. As word spread through the massive ships, humans and aliens alike prepared for a journey that would take them beyond everything known. For humanity, it was a chance to reclaim their destiny without repeating their mistakes. For their alien companions, it was the adventure of a lifetime. But for the galaxy they left behind, it was something else entirely. It was freedom from their greatest fear, purchased at the price of their best and brightest minds. As the human fleet engaged their intergalactic drives and vanished into the void between galaxies, the Milky Way settled into an uneasy peace. Humanity was gone, but their memory remained. And in that memory was both a warning and a promise. A warning that some forces were too dangerous to contain forever, and a promise that even the most terrible mistakes could sometimes lead to unexpected redemption. The galaxy would never forget the lesson of humanity, but perhaps in time they would remember it not as a tale of terror, but as proof that even apex predators could choose to evolve beyond their nature. In the depths of intergalactic space, Sarah Chen stood at the bow of her ship and looked ahead toward distant galaxies that had never known the touch of intelligent life. Behind her, human and alien voices planned for wonders yet to be built. They were no longer the conquerors their ancestors had been. They were explorers, ready to write new chapters in the cosmic story, and this time they would write them right.